Okay, all right, we're on. Okay, so we're gonna begin. I'm gonna get you the microphone for a moment, if you don't mind. Just squeeze in here. Yes. Oh, okay. Just sit by the other.
Okay, that's fine.
And if you see the screen going, okay, good morning, good day, good evening, everyone. This is a great pleasure to have about 200 listeners online for this webinar about communicating the SDGs. The purpose of this webinar is to, and let me just introduce myself first. My name is Peter Sereni. I'm from UN DOCO and a communications specialist there, and I will be organizing and moderating this event. The purpose of this webinar today is to provide you with more clarity on the global rollout of the Sustainable Development Goals and how you can lead communications activities in your countries to support that effort. There will be 3 speakers today, and we will have 90 minutes in total. The presentations will take in total about 15 to 20 minutes. So the bulk of this session is indeed meant to answer your questions. This webinar is being recorded, but if you have any difficulty in connecting, I have a number as well, which is 1 for the United States, 646-307-1706. That's 1-646-307-1706. And the access code is 391-914-638. You can put your questions in the chat box during the course of these presentations, and then we will answer those questions at the end of our short presentation session. We will have 3 presenters today. Our first presenter will be Nelson Muffuh, Head of Outreach, the Post-2015 Development of the Post-2015 Hub, where Nelson is responsible for stakeholder outreach, networking, partnerships, and communications in the Post-2015 Development Planning Team in the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General. He will talk about the general context, sort of what has been happening up until now, and provide us with a bigger picture look at the work into the SDGs. Then Francyne Harrigan, Chief Development Section, Strategic Communications Division at the Department of Public Information. She will talk about specific SDGs branding and messaging and the iconography, which you can now see on your screen. Mitchell Toomey, the director of the UN Millennium Campaign, is involved in many different things, but I'll just highlight one, which is it's one of the founding partners of the My World Global Citizen Survey, which has brought the voices and opinions of over 7 million people into intergovernmental decision-making processes at the United Nations. We will begin with a short 3-minute video just to kick off the presentations, and then we will move into the 3 presentations and then take your questions. So without further ado, let me just start our video.
Way to minimize this.
This is a moment in history where we are learning the lessons of the Millennium Development Goals and what we need to do to address existing challenges with new complexities. Unlike the Millennium Development Goals, this has been a process that's been the most open, transparent, broad, deep one that we've had in the United Nations ever. This is where we have gone out to civil society, we've gone out to business, to parliamentarians. The process itself has given great ownership to the goals and the priorities that people have set, the social agenda, the economic agenda, and the environment one. For the first time, we're not putting a Band-Aid on the problem, we're looking at the root causes, and unless we make the investments to look at those root causes, We are going to continue to have conflicts escalate. We're going to continue to see damage in the environment, and more people are going to be excluded. Inequality is going to be a mainstay, which is just not sustainable. I think it is time, and I think the Sustainable Development Agenda has come off its time, and this is where member states are very serious about the process and what they want to get out of it. Clearly, we can no longer continue to test the planet the way that we do. The one thing about this wonderful planet that we have and have look now is that we can exist without it. Not exactly idea. It has to have a responsibility in terms of the way we live. There is where countries need to grow. They will do high burden, coal, perhaps the same fossil fuels. But we need to find a way to bridge that to do better. Financing. This is an agenda about investing. It's not charity. It's in everyone's interest. We are better investing now because we just won't be able to afford it later.
Okay, so this was our warm-up, and now without further ado, let me introduce Nelson Muffuh, who will take it from here. Nelson?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, colleagues. Actually, it is a great honor and pleasure to be able to briefly reflect on the process of planning the post-2015 development agenda thus far, and briefly also offer some thoughts about the way forward with regards to how the UN system can support this process. We are very grateful, really, for the tremendous support that the UN system has really offered and responded actually to the Secretary General's call to ensure that the process of planning the post-2015 development agenda is the most inclusive, open, and transparent that the UN has actually embarked on. And really what the UN Development Group, UN country teams, and other UN agencies really did helped ensure that what member states agreed almost a couple of weeks back was the most comprehensive, integrated, and transformative agenda that would respond to the needs of people on the planet for the next 15 years. So really, recently, the Secretary General, actually, in acknowledging the consensus that has emerged from member states, offered his gratitude to UN colleagues as well as other stakeholders who have been an instrumental part of the process. Without such support, technical expertise, and also amplifying and channeling the aspirations and voices of citizens the world over through platforms like My World and The World We Want and other direct consultation mechanisms, we wouldn't have actually arrived at the outcome we currently have. So you have in front of you, and I know that the link was sent round for the 2030 agenda, Transforming Our World by 2030, which member states have agreed. So we'll now move from a phase of proposals on the goals, sustainable development goals, to them being now agreed goals. And then in September, when world leaders come to New York for the summit, they are going to adopt this package, which will then become adopted goals. So we currently now also thinking through how to move from and build on the extensive consultations and ownership building process, which Amina reflected in the brief video, to how we start thinking about supporting the implementation and delivery of this ambitious agenda. And through the post-2015 strategy hub, which we are currently sitting in, and which is actually an extension of the post-2015 planning unit in the Secretary General's office, we're trying to ensure that we can leverage and amplify all the advocacy, mobilization, and communications initiatives which UN stakeholders, but also most importantly our external partners, are working on to build momentum for a good outcome in September, to ensure that whatever we have emerged from the summit in September is complementary to and reflects actually the anticipated outcome from the climate summit at the end of the year, because these are all two sides of the same coin, sustainable development and climate change. But also, I think, to start ensuring that there is ownership and involvement of stakeholders around the world with the support of the UN system in implementing and monitoring the delivery of the post-2015 development agenda. So we have various stakeholders currently working on this, including a global citizens movement called Action 2015 that has to date more than 2,000 members from around the world who are currently undertaking actions in different countries to build momentum towards the summit, and will also be involved in ensuring that the summit, the outcomes of the summit are well implemented. So I know a number of colleagues in the country teams have been working with or maybe aware of this movement. If you aren't, I think it would really be great if in country you get acquainted more with what Action 2015 is doing and how that complements the tremendous efforts from UN colleagues as well with regards to building ownership for what is coming out at the global level, because it is only going to be as impactful as it is delivered at the local level. So it's moving really from global action to local delivery, which is really important. The other piece of the other initiative I just wanted to reflect on is something else we're working quite extensively with an anti-poverty campaigner and celebrity called Richard Curtis, and this is really called Project Everyone. So it is actually preparing the groundwork to ensure that upon the adoption of the goals in September, within 7 days, 7 billion people should know about or have heard about the goals in one way or the other. And using multiple platforms, community engagement, digital platforms, including YouTube and Google and Facebook and Twitter and Wikipedia, also faith groups and through radio, there's an effort to also ensure that different platforms are deployed to really push through the message about the opportunity we have over the next 15 years to ensure life and dignity for all. So that effort is also ongoing, and a number of UN stakeholders, including UNDP, UNICEF, and others are supporting this. And DPI, of course, is playing a central role in ensuring that from the UN side itself, we're well prepared to communicate about, have the tools and assets to use in promoting this agenda. And I would not say much about that because the other colleagues will be briefing you on this matter. So just to end by saying the UN system is a central actor in ensuring that we have a good outcome on post-2015 development agenda now on the table, waiting for member states to come and adopt at the summit here in September. And the UN will continue to play an instrumental part at the local level in ensuring that there's ownership around this agenda, that we inspire action for the delivery from all stakeholders, and we accompany governments actually as well in ensuring that this is well implemented for people and planet. So thank you, colleagues, for this opportunity, and I'll pause here, and when we come to the question and answer session, I'm ready to provide more clarity and details as may be necessary.
Thank you very much, Nelson. This is a great look at sort of the global view, and these sort of points can really inform your strategic thinking behind the SDGs. Let me now move to Francyne Harrigan of DPI, who will talk about branding, messaging, iconography, and other aspects.
Thanks, Peter. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to colleagues in the field. Thank you for joining us today. As Peter already mentioned, I'll touch on the communications for this year in the summit. I thought it would be useful to just start with touching on the campaign that DPI has been running this year, 2015 Time for Global Action. As many of you may be aware, the campaign is anchored around the three major events: Financing for Development, the Summit on Sustainable Development next month, and then the Paris Climate Conference. So as you all know, FFD, we've already had a successful outcome for the summit. The outcome document has already been agreed, as Nelson just mentioned, so we're in a good place leading up to the summit, and we're hoping, we're positive, we're looking at the Paris Climate Conference, and that the positive momentum will carry forth into Paris and the climate agreement there. In terms of the strategic goals for the campaign, the two main goals were to support the adoption of a new sustainable development agenda and the adoption of a climate agreement. It was also to promote action on sustainability and climate change. In terms of the communications goals, is to raise public awareness, build momentum for the ambitious outcomes for sustainable development, climate change and the finance conferences, highlight the accelerated action on sustainable development in these areas as a priority for the UN system, and highlight civil society's role for 2015 and support its Action 2015 campaign. So that's been a main focus coming up to this point. In terms of key messages, I'm sure many of you have already been using them. A number of them were, 2015 is the time for global action in order to achieve the future we want, etc. We're currently updating those, and then we'll be sharing those shortly. Just a couple of ones for the summit. A key focus is on pushing the new agenda. So the agenda first, before we move to individual agencies' specific goals. So that's a key drive for DPI, that we go in as the UN system, and then we start breaking up as far as the individual SDGs. Nelson might touch on this a bit more later, but also to keep the focus on the new agenda being transformative, universal, indivisibility nature of it. Those will also come out in the new key messages that we'll be sharing shortly. In terms of communications tools, throughout the year, we've focused very much on the UN6 official language and trying to get as much material, if not everything, in those languages. As part of that, we've had a dedicated mobile-friendly website, un.org/sustainable development. This will still be the site where we will pull together the summit information. There'll be the summit page. It'll be anchored around there. Our colleagues in News and Media Division have been pushing news stories, radio broadcasts, TV content. The one that you just saw was produced by UNTV, Amina, also B-roll packages, etc. This will continue to push through to the summit, and also social media packages have been a big focus of the campaign. In terms of social media, DPI leads and coordinates on social media promotion across the UN system. This has been through briefings, managing the social media content sharing tool Trello, which will still be a key tool leading up to the summit. In terms of Twitter chats, we also have some of those planned coming up. The SG LinkedIn influencer account, there's more content being pushed around there. Mostly we've been using the hashtag Action 2015 for the summit, or we already are, but for the summit particularly, we'll also be using hashtag Global Goals. In terms of social media content, we've been very heavy on the digital cards, the graphics, short videos, blog posts, etc., etc. In terms of the media mix, a key focus has been on targeting priority journalists and regular briefings to UN Press Corps here in headquarters by Amina and some of the other principals, USG Wu from DESC, etc. We've also focused on regional press briefings in the regions through our UN information centers. Around F15, we're planning to do the same leading into the summit. Op-eds, partnership to news outlets, etc. Press kits, again, in all official languages, have also been key areas. In terms of the summit, turning more to the summit now, there are 4 key areas that we're looking at. The immediate is the drum roll. So leading up to the summit, what content, what information do we need to put out, what assets do we need? Then turn to the summit, there's some key moments during that. There's the Pope's visit, which kicks off not officially the summit, but he speaks before the summit officially opens. There's the gavel moment, or when the SDGs are officially adopted, and when we'll be launching the SDGs and the icons that you see on the screen there, when those will officially be pushed out through the UN system. And then there are also interactive dialogues during the 2 days. So Friday is the opening day of the summit, and Saturday and Sunday, well, for the 3 days, there'll be interactive dialogues that we also want to focus on and make sure that we're getting the conversation outside of New York, and that we're also engaging with field officers and pushing out the content in the regions as well. And then there's the post-summit communications planning that we're doing. So implementation of the agenda, as Nelson just mentioned, and pushing out the SDGs, getting everyone aware of them, etc. In just a little bit more detail as far as what we're doing in those key areas. For media outreach, a key focus is targeting priority journalists, so top-tier journalists, and coordinated interviews for our principals. So,
hold on a second.
Production, everyone's here, so again, some
Okay.
technical feedback. Okay, so I'll carry on. So in terms of just a bit more detail, in the drumroll phase, we're really focused on getting the message out around the outcome agreement, moving into the summit with our principals, targeting top-tier journalists. But then, as I said, a key focus for DPI is really getting the message and the content and interviews outside of just New York, but also engaging on the ground globally. So we'll also be doing our regular briefings here in New York. Those are also webcasts. We'll be pushing those out. But also we'll be organising unique or WebExes with our UN information centres. They've also committed to around 30 briefings in the roll-up to the summit, and I hope that I'll be working with some of you on this call today. We have press kits that should be coming out in the next week. Again, they'll be in all 6 languages. They'll include the summit overview, FAQs, talking points for principals, the press releases for the lead up to the summit, some information for media as far as media accreditation. There'll also be details on web TV, what are the key moments where they'll be able to pull, access some of this footage, some of the interactive dialogues that are happening, etc. There'll be the new key messages. There'll be information on VR packages that colleagues in Unifeed will be pulling together. So there'll be all that information that you need to start preparing your briefings or engaging with media, or that you might want to share with media straight away. So as I mentioned, some of that material will be starting in the next week, and then we'll be doing a number of packages leading up to the summit. These will be shared initially by email, but also we'll be using the Trello tool to add content without contacting you all the time, but be continuously adding content there. In terms of media outreach around the summit, we'll be working with journalists at the summit. Security have already suggested that there may be as many as 5,000 journalists attending the summit this year. So obviously beyond the first day and the huge news between the Pope's visit and the launch of the SDGs, we also have Saturday and Sunday. We want to make sure that the journalists have enough content, news stories, etc. on those 2 days. So we'll be working hard to get stories to them, also our experts to them, since they won't have pre-movement completely around the building, but making sure that we have enough lined up briefings with our experts for them as well. So key areas, UN News Centre, UN Radio, UN TV, Unifeed will all be active, and I'll be sharing more information on how that will be looking in the next week or so. In terms of multimedia, I already mentioned the interactive dialogue. The plan is, with Nelson's team, we're looking at developing videos for each of those dialogues. And as part of that, so those videos will be assets that people can use, but also how do we make the conversation, how do we broaden the conversation outside of the room, so to speak, here in New York, and engage outside. So we'll be looking at something more interactive through social media or other means, through webcasts, etc., where we can actually engage both ways, and we're not just sending content out, but we're also engaging back and getting involvement in the process. We'll also be, we are developing graphic cards, celebrity cards. We're working with our messengers of peace to get quotes, etc., that we can push out during the summit once the SDGs are adopted, etc. We're working on other content such as sustainable development photo feature. As far as social media package, we'll be doing a number of mini campaigns, so to speak, around engaging with youth. What kind of role do they want? This will be pre-summit, looking at the goals, post-summit. I'll be sharing more information, more details on that in the next week. Also explaining the SDGs, we'll have expert videos for each SDG. We'll also have a take action guide. We also have a portrait series, stories around real people, how they benefited around some of these issues, or how it would change their lives if this were to happen, etc. So we'll be sharing those social media packages too. In terms of branding, DPI is also working on the summit logo and also the content, the assets around the icons, SDG icons. So just to reiterate on the icons, these are embargoed. The ones you see on the screen at the moment, we are in the process of applying the UN logo, etc., and we will be issuing the official UN icons in the next week or two, hopefully. Along with that, we'll be sending the branding guidelines and some other products that colleagues can use, whether it's posters, but some already designed products that you can take and use in the field. And then you'll have all the breakdown of how you can use it yourselves and pull and create your own content as well. Also, social media package around the launch of the SDGs will also have a full package for that as well. Just quickly, in terms of working together or asks from our side, I thought it would just be useful just to point to a couple of things that we can work together with, or that would be worth mentioning when you're reaching out in your areas. Like I mentioned, we'll be sharing the key messages. If these could be shared with principals and colleagues that are speaking on the issue, that would be great. And as far as pushing out one message and having clarity across the system, but also in different corners of the world, so to speak. It would be great if there were interviews with your principals organized on the ground with your local media. Also, I know that a lot of you already support as far as sharing social media content, so that would be great when you start sending out the social media packages, same with press materials. In terms of the summit logo, it would be great if you could feature the logo on your web pages, and then we can have that feeding back to our site. I think I'll stop there. There's some other areas where I think we can work together more closely, but I can go into that if there are questions or in the interest of time. I'll stop there, but I can always share those points in a follow-up email as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Francyne. This is a lot of really, I think, critical and important information to give country teams a sense of what's happening now and what you can all expect coming down the line. Let me now hand the mic to Mitchell Toomey of the UN Millennium Campaign, and he'll be talking about UN-sponsored campaigning in 2016 and onward.
Thank you, Peter, and hello, everyone. Thank you for your time and around the world at different times of the day. It's great to have you with us. During the lead-up, as Nelson said, to the SDGs, there was an enormous outreach to citizens and civil society organizations. Many different things were tried, amongst them the umbrella of the world we want, which many of you in country teams took part in. The process of allowing country teams to interpret the best way to engage citizens locally while providing some international frameworks and reusable tools proved very successful thanks to the great innovations that we saw coming out of your offices. You know best how to talk through the subtleties of some of these issues in your countries, and we've learned very, very clearly that where there are some commodity type supports that we can offer, it really comes down to you having an ear to the ground and understanding how best to take this message forward. In the campaign, we are actively working with the Action 2015 network on a couple of things, even leading up to the summit. You may have heard about something called send-off events. Send-off events are where civil society organizations are asking for a moment with the members of the delegation that will be coming to the summit to once again encourage them and thank them for taking the ambition of the citizens and turning it into an international agreement. So there are send-off events scheduled in many countries around the world. If anyone is interested, I have more information on that. We will also be providing venues here at the summit for briefings on, again, the results of those consultations, should delegations be interested, to once again reinforce the idea that these goals are citizen-backed, people-backed goals. Some countries are also having welcome home events, and this is coinciding with the Social Goods Summit. Many of you are aware that over 100 offices, UNDP-led but UN country team supported in the past, have undertaken Social Goods Summit events concurrent with the international event that's held in New York and a couple of other capitals. In those events, we expect there to be some engaging opportunities to take these icons and these the goals as they're named, and consider in a perhaps a youth consultation or a civil society consultation of some kind, how might the local language reinterpret the short names of these goals, et cetera. So starting to have a conversation around the goals to start the local conversation, that would be something hosted by the Social Good Summit events that you could take part in. We're also having we plan to move forward with something called Celebrating Citizens' Voices, where exceptionally active members of civil society or individuals who have made a difference in consulting citizens and bringing those voices to the government officials will be recognized and celebrated. We're starting with a small series of those awards at the GA this year at the summit, bringing people from many countries who have shown dramatic impact and transformational impact to highlight those stories, and we'll continue to do that in the future. So our focus, as is everyone else's, is really making the most of this launch moment. We're going to apply every asset the campaign has, and we invite you to join us and ask if you need support. We're here for you. Moving forward, the campaign will be converted into from a Millennium Development Goals focus into a Global Goals focus, which will allow continued support for those LDCs and others who are still working on MDGs as they transition, but also taking the message of the SDGs into the kind of interactive world where not only are we pushing messages out, but we're actually setting up activities like World We Want dialogues, My World, subsequent rounds of voting, and other such interactive tools for you to use to engage with, as well as communicating with the citizens and people of your countries. So I'll leave it there, other than to say that our service through the UNDG as the campaign will be to help you in-country teams understand what's available and provide support for using them, including things like Global Pulse, social media listening tools that you can provide. We can provide help for you setting up in-country, additional voting mechanisms and capabilities, and so on. So these tools, interactive tools, are going to be continued. The World We Want approach, the networks that were developed will be nourished and expanded, and we hope to support you in that effort in the same modality that was used in the lead-up. Your resident coordinators will have received a message from Helen Clark in her role as head of UNDG, providing some information and support about the basic program touching pieces of the SDG rollout, and that also includes the extension of the World We Want conversation support model. And so that's where we'll be available to support you moving forward past the summit as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mitchell, for this. You touched on a number of different things: how to spur local conversation, interpret the global goals, celebrating citizens' voices, and other activities that you can take forward. On this note, let me just open up our webinar to questions. So one moment, and I will read off the first question.
I bet no one's questions box.
Okay, so let me, there has been some comment that the audio is not as strong as it could be, so let me shout, and let me also ask our speakers to maybe just encapsulate the question that I'm asking just for the purpose of the microphone. Okay, the first question is there any specific scope under the umbrella of SDGs that young people and media persons can contribute in the national efforts in line with the SDGs? From Bangladesh. Maybe Mitchell, would you like to take that?
Sure. I mean, we found youth engagement and the numbers we saw were dramatic and impressive in many countries, including Bangladesh. We all know that as with the MDGs, the goals themselves are great, but having the political will to execute often requires a lot of citizen engagement and citizen demand to their leaders for this. So I think that the primary role right now is awareness building and making sure that the case is made that these goals have been adopted and agreed. Youth are great advocates for those pure messages of the hope for the future, and I think that using them as conduits and interviewers for getting time with their governments to make this case is very important. Again, the political will only be there if the citizens are demanding it of their leaders.
Okay, great. Just to make sure I'm going to get a little bit closer to the mic. The next, thank you very much, and continue, please, to put your questions in the mic in the question panel. This question is for Nelson from Tanzania, and the question is, how best would you advise us to work with local governments, to reach people in rural areas, and also a question regarding prioritizing the goals at the country level. Will this be led by UNCT or HQ? Thanks from Tanzania.
Okay. Well, thanks, colleague from Tanzania. Just to start with the last part of the question and to say, actually reinforce what Francyne, my colleague from DPI, said. From the UN Secretariat, we are trying to ensure that there is an understanding that this package of 17 goals should be delivered in an integrated manner as much as possible, and not to cherry pick at the local level in the implementation. So it is less about prioritizing the goals as in selecting which ones to implement, but really to think about how to support government in integrating the 17 in national development plans, and then monitoring the delivery of those development plans. So we're not trying to promote a separate SDGs development track, which is separate from what governments are already working on with regards to national development plans and visions and all that. So just to flag that, of course, different goals or different targets are more relevant to different countries, and I hope that this integration and review process and the support that the UN system will be providing to governments in country will take into consideration some of that. With regards to reaching really citizens at the community and local levels and sub-national levels, again, we hope that that's something that dedicated effort from the UN country teams who really already are present in country and working in remote areas as well, who will help take that forward, working with local authorities. At the global level, union of, we've been working with local authorities and mayors. There's UCLG, this network that has really been quite active in supporting the emergence of the agenda. And they already have this network of mayors and local authorities that are actively preparing to implement the agenda. Same with the Parliamentary Union, IPU, just to flag that parliamentarians as well who will have local constituencies to be another entry point to ensure that these goals can really get to that level. Of course, engaging, just like the Millennium Campaign has been doing, faith groups, but also community-based organizations would be another way to partner with some of these civil society stakeholders to ensure that the goals not only get to the local level, are understood at the local level, but then local communities are part of the process of implementing and monitoring the delivery of this, particularly Goal 16, which really is about justice, rule of law, peace and security, really talks about the need for inclusion and participation in the delivery of the whole set of goals on the agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Nelson. Those are a lot of great nuggets in terms of how to help the goals connect with individuals and people at the local level. I think these were a lot of great ideas. Let me just ask, do any of the other panelists would like to take this question further? Okay. We have a question from, let's see, there's a question regarding the SDG icons themselves. So the global goals identity will stay, question mark.
Yeah.
Talking about, I guess, localizing the goals.
Sure. So just to be clear, the goals that are on the screen at the moment are an earlier version. I'll try to pull up the latest display or the latest how they are. But just to be clear, the final ones will have the UN logo. They'll be UN branded. They'll be referred to as the Sustainable Development Goals, not the global goals. There'll be tweaks to a little bit of the language from the UN side, but we expect that Project Everyone, who's been behind the ones that you see on the screen at the moment, that we expect to have the same language and the same design going out on September 25th. So the ones that we send out in the next week or so will be the official UN ones. So we're still working with Project Everyone, and we should all have the same ones going out at the same time. The images will not change. The ones you see on the screen, the icons themselves, the design will not change. The colors won't change. Nothing will change. It's just one or two tweaks to language, and like I said, it'll have the UN logo and the Sustainable Development Goals. As I already mentioned, they will be embargoed till the official adoption on the first day of the summit. Just to give a little breakdown on the summit day itself, the Pope is expected to speak around 10 a.m. on Friday, September 25th, until around 10:40, 10:45. Obviously, this isn't set in stone yet, but this is the indication at the moment. Then there'll be around 10 minutes opening ceremony, and then the summit will officially open at 11 o'clock that day. We're hoping that the SDGs will be adopted around 11:30, and that's what we're referring to as the gavel moment. At the gavel moment, and we'll have the set time hopefully soon when that will happen, that's when the UN system can release all this content. So as I mentioned, we'll be sending the branding guidelines soon, how the logos can be used, how the UN logo can be used, how you can break them apart and use them for your own products, etc. We'll also be including some products digital products that you can just run with straight away. So we'll be sending that shortly, but as far as releasing them, the UN system, the guidance is for September 25th, when the Secretary General and the member states officially launch, which we expect to be around 11:30, Friday, September 25th. But again, we'll send more information and confirmation on that in the weeks ahead. But hopefully we'll have the icons and all the assets to you next week or before the end of August, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Francine. So it sounds like next week or later this month, the country teams will be receiving the materials from DPI. Let me just, we have one request to reiterate who the speakers are, just for the sake of clarity. And our first speaker is Nelson Muffuh of the Post-2015 Hub. And second speaker is Francyne Harrigan of the Department for Public Information. And then followed by Toomey, Director of the UN Millennium Campaign. There's one question concerning are there any activities going on in developed countries concerning the SDGs? Would anyone like to take that one?
I can start. It's Nelson Muffuh here. Yes, definitely. One of the key tenets of the new development agenda is that it is universally applicable and focuses on sustainable development. So indeed, a communication and mobilization of stakeholders in developed countries is as important as it is doing the same in developing countries. The number of goals, and actually all of the goals that you would see has a bearing as well on action that is taken in developed countries. So working with all of the stakeholders we've mentioned before, external partners, that is, there is a concerted effort to ensure that the general public and the leaders and the business leaders as well in developed countries are aware of the implications of the agenda with regards to developed countries. So the Project Everyone effort to tell everyone about the agenda and inspire action is targeting everyone, not only in the South, the global South. the effort that the UN through DPI and other agencies is undertaking is also about ensuring we access the media and use platforms in the north and not only in the south. And also the Action 2015 civil society mobilization, which I mentioned, is actually also very active in developed countries. So the idea is to engage leaders from all sectors, particularly in the public sector, and also mobilize the public to be behind the delivery of this goal. So yes, we're doing a lot at all levels and globally.
I would just add that in the past, the Millennium Campaign operated in many European capitals, but the campaign at that time was about promotion of the idea of healthy ODA levels and getting citizens engaged in that angle of the conversation. So obviously, this time around, some of the same infrastructure that was used for those campaigns will be resurrected, but obviously the message will be different. So it'll be a two-track message, as Nelson mentioned, domestic achievement of the goals, as well as continued support for ODA to ensure the LDCs get to the mark as well.
I mean, I could just flag two key examples. So the UN Information Center in Washington, as well as in Brussels, have been extremely active with regards to promoting the emergence of this agenda and engaging policymakers, particularly in Washington for the US side and in Brussels for the EU side, and we expect that to continue. So just and also UNDP actually in Brussels has been very active on that front.
Okay, great. All right, great. Thank you very much for that. There's one question concerning, maybe we can just reiterate, there's one question concerning any specific materials that DPI will produce to prepare, how to prepare media for local media for the SDGs. Any specific materials on that? Maybe we can just reiterate or touch on a few points. Francyne?
Thank you for the question. I imagine it's in terms of either setting up interviews or maybe it's for media briefings. In terms of setting up interviews, we will, like I said, be developing the key messages principles, but also some talking points. So talking points around some of the trickier questions that have been coming out in the media, and then also some FAQs and frequently asked questions that touch on some of the broader questions that arise. So those will be really useful in preparing your key people to speak to media. In terms of media briefings, we are developing the press kits. So that would be press release on the summit. That would be, again, the FAQs, the backgrounders on the SDGs. So we'll have a full press kit that can also be shared with local media, either if you have a briefing or if you want to share in the run-up to and develop stories with them. So I hope that's covered your question. So we should have a full media pack, so to speak, that we can share with you in the next week or two. But if there's anything more specific, then still please post the question and I can give more detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francyne. There's just one follow-up question on the sizing of imagery, because I guess in the past some were too small for wide usage. Can you maybe comment on that, Francyne, in terms of the range of imagery that will be provided?
These are being developed by the graphics team in DPI, in the Department of Public Information. So I would imagine within the branding guidelines that they will touch on all these different areas, but I will flag that to them. And like I said, they will be given a bunch of variables as to how these can be used. So I'll pass that on, and like I said, they'll be doing the full package. So I would anticipate that that's already been included, but I will flag it with them as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, there's a question concerning the launch itself, in-country launch. And the question is, how would you suggest going about it? Let the government launch, or versus having the UN system take the lead? What do you do when circumstances prevailing in the country may not stimulate necessary drive for government to lead in the process from the outset? Maybe I'll pass the mic to Mitchell Toomey of the Millennium Campaign.
Thank you, Peter. It's very important that now that the role of the UN in convening and building consensus and so on is reaching a culmination, the implementation is going to be kind of a compact between the leaders and their people. And I think that in any way possible for the leadership of the government to be driving the kind of the adoption and launch of the goals in country is much more sustainable than for it to be seen as a UN exercise alone. What we found to be very influential and effective in the lead up, and we're using a lot of the data learned from the global conversation in making our plans, is that when we have active civil society at the local level with endorsement or encouragement from the government to take forward the campaign, or in this case the conversation, we saw the most dramatic and creative results. So while we as the UN obviously have a role to play in facilitating and convening and making the kind of the opportunities brought forward in celebrating these goals, as much as possible, if the government is keen and interested to have the front face be the government and the citizens themselves, with the UN providing that backstop and the support that they might need and the international encouragement to move forward. In cases where at the outset the government is not in a position to advocate, or it's not timely, that's a case-by-case decision that has to be made in country. There may well be a huge opportunity for, in that case, the UN to make the most of the moments and say, make the statements necessary. But again, it will only be bolstered by the government's commitment to making these goals happen. This is a 15-year agenda. We're trying to make the most of this launch moment, but obviously in some countries we may find that the timing is not perfect, and there may need to be a kind of a renewed effort in the near future or over the next year to really do a concerted effort in country based on the timing, whether perhaps there's elections coming or something that you need to be in a quiet period for until thereafter. That's exactly why we rely on you in country to make the best decisions. We do want to make as much international noise as possible at this moment, and there will be non-governmental actors all over the world who are already engaged, regardless of their specific government's kind of response to this moment. But as it is our job to make sure that these international norms and standards are brought to the country and the country's then given the opportunity to domesticate and consider them, I think that's an obvious moment. We do have 40 or 50 countries going into UNDAF design phases, and this is obviously a moment to have to renew open consultation and open discussion around these goals, and to use that moment of the UNDAF design as an opportunity to foster that conversation between the government and its people.
And colleagues, just Nelson here, just to flag that there are provisions in the anticipated agenda for the follow-up and review of the implementation of this at all levels. And in as much as it is a voluntary-based approach, member states are being requested, and that's all member states, to report on the achievement of this agenda. And also, there is a request that the UN system at all levels, national, regional, and global, support member states in reporting on this. So there is, I think, an interest from the member state side, and this is part of the consensus around the agreement, that there is going to be an effort to ensure that the UN member states and also other stakeholders are involved in this process and working together to review the implementation of this agenda. So that could help inform how you approach this at the national level, and where some governments may be reticent, just to remind them of what has been agreed at the global level. One point I just wanted to also just conclude with is that the UN also is thinking through, and this is part of the UNDG effort as well, being fit for purpose to support government in delivering this agenda. So we cannot approach this agenda in the way we did the MDGs. It calls for the UN to work in different ways with each other and with other stakeholders to deliver a sustainable development agenda, which really has to be again, I use the word integrated in its approach and its delivery. So we need to think a little bit about the implications of that for work at the country level and working with each other at the country teams.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you very much, Mitchell and Nelson. I think this is a lot of great food for thought and ways in which to take the SDGs forward at the local and national level. We have a question from Albania asking whether are we advised to use the goals in their shortened version, which is certainly easy to understand, but can we do that?
I think from the UN side and the expectation of member states is that at the very least we don't back away from the full names of the goals as has been agreed by member states. Complex as they may be, they contain a lot of nuance and substance that reflect the breadth of the Sustainable Development Agenda, the 3 dimensions of social, economic, and environment. So as much as possible in official written UN documents, we need to stick with the full names of the 17 goals as well as the targets. Now, with regard to external communications purposes and particularly public engaging the public, then I think what Francyne highlighted is the fact that a UN branded version of the icons, including the short names, will be made available, and that I think can complement any usage of the full names. But we really would urge colleagues to think about from the onset finding ways of also not backing away from the full names of the goals as have been agreed by member states.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nelson, for that. The next question is about, obviously country teams are looking to connect the global goals with the local context. And the question is, can we receive all the visual materials in editable form so we can adapt, translate them into local language? Will additional widgets or web content for SDGs be provided for our web pages so that we can have harmonized promotion of the UN websites, for the UN websites?
So I think essentially the answer is yes. In terms of the, we will be, I can't read the question, but in terms of the content that we'll share, like I mentioned, it will be in the 6 official languages, so we will provide all of that. But again, it will be broken down, so if it's a video that you can add your own, whether it's a voiceover or whether it's just tracking as far as the subtitles, or if it's web content, we'll provide all the assets so that you can adapt to your own language as well. So yes, that's all part of the package. So 6 the UN official languages, and then yes, we encourage further translation. So we'll always factor that into all the materials that we share.
Okay.
And just to flag that working with some of our external partners, for example, Wikipedia has pledged to translate the goals into more than 200 local languages I think sometime in September. So as all of these assets and customizations become available, we will ensure that it gets to colleagues across the world.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nelson. There's a question concerning the transition from the MDGs to the SDGs. How, in a way, given the various, wait a minute, no, sorry. Are there any materials to guide us in communicating the transition from the MDGs to the SDGs to pave the way to sensitize our audiences and stakeholders to this, in terms of this transition?
Sure. On the we in I think it was June we launched the MDG report and the last one, and as part of that there were some materials around the MDG to SDG transition. So we already have some materials. We're also developing additional ones, both digital content, written content that we'll be sharing as part of these packages. So even though the package that we'll be sharing shortly is focused on the summit, there'll also be the MDG content, there'll be the FFD content that's relevant to the summit and other communication, there'll be the MDG to SDG transition, And then post-summit, we'll also be developing additional content specifically for the end of the year when we move from officially from the MDGs to the SDGs. So just in short, there is content that we already have that we can share, and there is content that's being developed and that will be shared after the summit as well, or during the summit, but also before the end of the year, additional content. Mitch, I don't know if you...
Yes, well, several countries have really taken the MDGs to heart, and they're really still midway, and some of them have national plans that refer to the MDGs into the next few years. And so obviously, in those contexts, the MDGs are still a very important and vital element. As you'll see, and as you know in the main points, the MDGs are embedded in the first few of the SDGs. The targets are more ambitious, but the goals are still there. And so there isn't kind of an entirely different agenda here. It's an incrementally more ambitious agenda. In some countries, the effort to have this conversation about the move from MDG to SDG is underway. We've had some requests for workshops with parliamentarians and others who have organized themselves in committees and commissions around the MDGs for advice on how to expand those types of operational utilities. That's not so much a campaigning and communications task, but it is very valuable to know that these kind of conversations and, as we saw, the interactions and participatory processes are open for these questions as well. Because I think there's been a lot of advocacy, a lot of civil society engagement in many countries on the MDGs, and they feel that those are not yet accomplished. So it's incredibly important to bring them along and to show that there is a process for including the same initiatives and the same actors in the conversation around the SDGs.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mitchell. We have a question from, if you are putting in a question, I think it would also be helpful just to know which country you're from. So that field currently doesn't exist in this webinar panel, so maybe you could just add that into your question. That would be great. There's one question, I guess, touching again on this theme of localization. Are there comms advocacy tools examples available where people, not organizations, can take action and hold their governments accountable in the adoption of the SDGs? This maybe touches on some of the things we've been discussing, but who would like to take that question, Mitchell?
Well, briefly, yes, indeed. The power of individual action has been very clearly displayed in the lead up to the SDGs. While we have had many civil society organizations and the Action 2015 Coalition driving much of the kind of institutional conversation, what we've seen is individuals empowered by campaigning themselves or participating in activities like the My World exercise. My World was, and many of you are familiar, not only a global vote, but also it was something that an individual could register as a My World partner and go out and run their own local mobilization. And we found that many of the 7 million votes or 8 million that came in actually came from individuals taking action, not just to vote and promote things on social media, but to go to their village or go to their community and have a conversation around the goals themselves using the My World survey as the basis for that conversation. So indeed, we feel that that is a very powerful way of what the so-called viral marketing of one person to the next, sending the message along to complement the major media push and other communications efforts that are underway. So we will be providing a second round of My World survey materials, and these will be kind of internationally kind of vetted policy questions, but put into the language that citizens can understand, that promote the idea of the next step of the process, not prioritizing the goals, but rather looking for where the country might be best succeeding, or the satisfaction levels, or the effort that one wishes to put into different goals themselves. So these will be utilities that you can pick up and use. But as we saw in the global conversation, many countries came up with spectacularly creative ways of doing that were truly in sync with the local conversation. So we want to encourage that and promote that to the fullest degree.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mitchell, of the UN Millennium Campaign. There's a question concerning, and maybe this is for Francyne, just in terms of will there be any fact sheets or other materials to back up will that be part of the materials that would be sent from DPI to country teams?
Yeah, so there'll be fact sheets will cover each SDG. So we'll cover the summit, the overview, it'll cover sustainable development more broadly, and then it'll break down into SDGs individually. So that'll be as far as press materials, but we're also looking at that as far as digital content. So in terms of fact sheets, absolutely. Again, I mentioned the press kit, that'll be part of the press kit, so also the talking points, also the frequently asked questions. Fact sheets are part of that. So as comprehensive as we can be in getting all this information to everyone so that you will have these materials that you can start pushing out and using yourselves to familiarize with all these different aspects. So yes, fact sheets, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you, Francyne of DPI. There is a question which actually I've seen before from country teams. I think it's a very good question in terms of linking this new Sustainable Development Agenda with the 70th anniversary of the UN. And I think the question is, what sort of ideas might we have on how to go about that linkage?
Okay, I could start off, and then I hope DPI colleagues can also clarify. One of my understanding of the UN at 70 celebration is that it looks at not only where the UN is coming from, but also seeks to project how the UN will be an instrumental part in ensuring we promote world peace, respect rights, and also achieve sustainable development. And the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Agenda and package that is being adopted by world leaders this September, really is a part of that celebration, and I think signpost to the future which the UN is going to be putting out there. So there is, I think, an explicit link between UN celebrating its 70th anniversary as well as the adoption of not only the post-2015 agenda, but also the financing for development outcome, and as well the climate agreement anticipated at the end of the year. So all of this, in such an important year, I think is really, really cause to celebrate what the UN is contributing, but also how the UN intends to go forward with continuing to play this role. So I think that in my mind is where the link comes in, but maybe colleagues from DPI have more to say. Yeah.
I think as far as the summit, the UN at 70 may not be as prominent, but it is touched on, but the General Assembly itself, it will play a more prominent role. And I think while there have been activities throughout the year, this year, UN at 70, the big push will be obviously around UN Day or UN Week. And I think that's a great opportunity to make the link between UN at 70 and what Nelson was just saying as far as the new agenda and what the UN is going to be working on going forward. So I would have to come back to the group as far as colleague-specific activities that are happening around that time in more details, but I think that's something that we could share the plans that are already developed by colleagues in DPI, and I'd be happy to share that through Peter after this meeting if you can find that useful.
Okay, great. Thank you, Francyne, for that. There's one question, a couple questions remaining. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box and identify the countries you're from. This is a question, I don't see what country you're from, but it's the question is, how do you, maybe some advice for UN country teams and how to get to nudge different agencies to really start working together to ensure successful transition to the SDGs and effectively coordinate money for development.
Maybe I'll just start with an example. Having just come from the field, so to speak, I'm just coming from Bangkok. The most effective way that I found worked in Thailand was the UN Communications Group. So that was the one area where we would work as one UN, and that might be through social media campaign. So if I give the example of the social media campaign, it was very easy to share the workflow. Different agencies would take the lead. Some might be better on photos, maybe it was a photo contest. Some might be better at organizing it. Some might have a bigger platform to push it out. But looking at areas where everyone has a vested interest in the workload share, that would be, for me, an easy fit and an easy push to get UN Communications Group to come together, usually around UN Day, but also with MDGs. We did major work around that, pushing all the MDGs across each agency, and there's never, every agency was involved. And the same with the SDGs. The great thing about SDGs is we're all in the game, so to speak. So it is an issue that plays very well to every agency. So it's pulling everyone together and then finding some product or some mini campaign that everyone feels they're vested in, they can get involved with, and then seeing how the workload can share out between the smaller agencies that might be in the field compared to the bigger ones. And that would be one way that I would recommend looking at getting everyone together, call that first meeting and get everybody energized and brainstorming on what might work in that particular area. But I'm sure, Mitch, if you...
Just a couple of points. I think, it's true many UNCG communications groups tackle these kind of challenges all the time and trying to find ways to communicate well together, and some are having dramatic, great results. I think your question might be a bit deeper than just the communications, though, as far as how do agencies collaborate and program and fundraise and so on together using the SDGs as a framework. That's an incredibly important conversation. I know many of you are coordination officers and looking for opportunities to tie things together. The SDGs does indeed provide that framework, but I go back to the point of when you're getting deeper into the programming and planning, the UNDAF process will be, the guidelines are being updated to ensure that the SDGs are indeed the kind of framework against which UNDAF planning is taken. And as we know from UNDAF, sometimes that becomes a siloed agency approach, but this is an opportunity to have a different kind of conversation with government and with ourselves, frankly, across agencies to see how we might better collaborate. In addition to looking at the communications challenges and opportunities for the SDGs, the UNDG has a comprehensive package of support in the works to tackle those more programmatic issues. You may have heard of the MAPS, M-A-P-S approach. This is again, I'll restate the message from Helen Clark to all resident coordinators recently in the past, I think, 2 weeks, giving a briefing of what the MAPS program is, how it could be leveraged by country teams, what funding might be available, et cetera, to use this as a means and as an opportunity to have some collaboration that might have been more difficult in the past.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mitchell, for that, Mitchell and Francyne. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 more final questions. And this is maybe just an opportunity. The question is, how soon will the information material be ready? Lucky from Nigeria. Maybe we can just, if this is the last question, we can sort of reiterate the very practical timeline for release of the materials that will start you along your way. Indeed, the planning can start before then, but Francyne?
Okay, maybe I'll start with that then. So as far as the materials that are on the way, that would be press kits. So the press kits will be ready in the next week. So they will come out initially English, and then we'll follow up with the other official languages. Those will go out by email initially, but then also, as I mentioned, on the Trello tool, so that we'll be updating with the languages as they come in. So those will be ready. Some of the materials will be done. They should be going out next week from DPI. As far as the digital content, again, there's a lot of material already produced, and that will also be shared next week. And again, that will still be being populated over the next few weeks and in the lead up to the summer. Social media package, we're working on that now. An initial social media package also will go out next week. Again, because we're 6 weeks away and we have kind of the drum roll initially, and then we want more detailed content coming into the conference, there will be a number of packages. So we'll send the initial one out now, so you get all the basic information, basic digital content, and then we'll be updating it ongoing. But we'll probably do a second email push in early September as well with additional content. But like I mentioned, we'll include the Trello link and you can be referring to that every week, and there will be fresh content going up, ongoing. As far as the branding package, the summit logo should be finished in the next few days, and I would hope that would come out to you next week. And as far as the icons branding, I would hope that that would also be coming out next week, but the summit logo will definitely, that's a lot quicker and more straightforward to push out. We hope to have that next week, but also in the next week or so, the icons and branding guidelines and all that package as well. So those are the key areas that we'll be pushing out pretty soon.
Nelson here from the Secretary General's Office in the Post-2015 Hub. Just to also flag that publicly available open source assets are available from globalgoals.org website as well as action2015.org website. So these are civil society externally driven projects and platforms which also contain some useful assets that may be useful or not to you, but these do not replace the UN official assets which Francyne just outlined, but just to flag that these two platforms also already have started putting up short films and other types of assets that may be useful in publicly communicating about the agenda. So I repeat, globalgoals.org and action2015.org.
Sorry, can I just come back just very quickly? Just to be clear, the initial communications package that we'll be sending out next week is very much in the run-up to the summit. There'll be a full communications package for the summit itself, and that includes the gavel moment when the SDGs are officially adopted. So all the press material that's required around that, the press release, additional fact sheets, etc., that will be an additional communications package that you'll be getting probably early September. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mitchell, Nelson, and Francyne. Maybe the last question, there's a request to share the materials in editable format. And there's one question from Dunstan from the regional UNDG for Eastern and Southern Africa. Any role you foresee for regional UNDGs? Does anyone want to?
Well, I think that everyone's gonna be asked to get creative and think about how any standing group, utility, organization, or other tool of the UN system can be used for this effort. I think, you know, as we saw with the MDGs, there's a great interest in regional reporting and kind of a progress report for the region. It's a great conversation starter to frame anything that might be coming around. As far as the announcements and popularization, I would just suggest that any of the UNDG entities at the regional level take every effort they can to join in on these campaigns. There won't be a specific targeted instruction from, as far as I know, specifically for the regional UNDG groups. But I think you can probably infer it and pull away from any of the elements that are coming out of the country level guidance and the global guidance to apply appropriately at your regional level.
Yes, Francyne would like to add something.
If I just add, just in terms of communications and media, as far as we're talking at the country level primarily, but as far as media, there's a great interest in speaking to people at the regional level. So if you have principals, experts that you can connect with regional media, regional broadcasters, or some of the outlets that reach beyond the national level, that's also very useful because some of the experts at the country level might not be able to address other countries or just a broader, bigger picture of how the issue looks across each region. So that's, from a communication standpoint, that is a valuable addition that can be added to the outreach and the campaigns in each region.
Okay, great. I think that was our last question. So let me just briefly wrap up. First of all, I would like to thank our panelists today. I'd like to thank Nelson and Francyne and Muffuh for their contributions. I think that this, from the DOCO standpoint, I think we have, I think that there is, been provided a lot of clarity on, practical issues in terms of the materials that will be provided, when, and the timeline for getting you those. Also in terms of how to connect the global SDGs with local stakeholders and local audiences, governments. I think that there's been good advice here in terms of providing for how to actually go forward with your launch at the country level and how to engage stakeholders in rural and local areas. Going forward, I think that this will be a great opportunity to link the SDGs with UNDAP processes. As I think Mitchell mentioned, there are about 50 countries which are undergoing UNDAP revisions or UNDAP processes now. So I think that this will be, that these goals and material will be great opportunities to, to link the sustainable development goals with planning processes at country level. So on that note, let me just conclude, unless there's any final word from the panelists. And this webinar has been recorded, so we will be distributing the recording through the CPN network. Once again, my name is Peter Sereni of UNDOCO, and if you have any specific questions, you can always write to me in email. So thank you very much, and I hope this was a productive and useful and informative session. So good night, good afternoon, good day, good morning, depending on which time zone you're in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, as well.
Sorry. I'm just going to put your email for any